Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Yuri Bender, editor of Professional Wealth Management magazine. I would like to welcome you to FT headquarters for this video discussion about the future of Swiss private banking and some of the threats which the country's industry currently faces. In the studio with me today, I have Shelby Dupasquier, a partner with Swiss law firm Lenz & Stalin, an expert on the rules governing the Swiss banking sector. Hello, Shelby.
Hello, Yuri.
Shelby, we have an aggressive investigation by the US authorities into tax evasion by wealthy individuals aided by foreign banks. Is this investigation particularly aimed at Switzerland?
Well, I think it's obvious that Switzerland is being targeted by the US investigation you just mentioned. But that's not to say that, this is the only center which is being targeted. But given the prominence of Switzerland in private banking, I think it's probably natural that we be on the forefront in this attack.
Which other centers do you expect to be targeted and to be hitting the headlines in this kind of investigation, Shelby?
Well, I think, to the extent the US government is in a campaign which aims at fighting against tax evasion by its US taxpayers, one can assume that a number of other jurisdictions will be attacked if they are not already under investigation, and jurisdictions like Monaco, like Hong Kong, and others are going to be also the target of the investigation by the US authorities.
Begelin, the Swiss bank, and they were essentially almost put out of business and forced to be sold. Do you expect other banks to be affected in a similar fashion?
Well, you have to understand that the source of information, the primary source of information of the US authorities are the voluntary disclosures which they have been able to prompt through the various amnesty programs they have put in place. And it is through these programs that they've been able to get access to bank names as well as the name of the relationship managers involved in this clientele. Turning to Wegelin, I don't think that Wegelin was actually on a blacklist, but what came out of the voluntary disclosure programs was a policy decision that was taken apparently by that bank to actually go after aggressively former UBS US clients. And this is something which the US government did not want to happen and could not let go. Now, as to whether other banks have been aggressively pursuing former UBS US clients, as far as I'm aware, this is not the case. At least this is the general statement that one hears in the Swiss marketplace. Whether as a practical matter it happened, I do not know. That being said, although I expect until such time a resolution of this matter is achieved, I expect additional indictments, in particular against employees of other banks, part of this 11-bank group or outside of that group. I would not anticipate an indictment of another Swiss banking institution. At least I have no element that would lead me to that conclusion at this stage.
But how about further sales, and how will the prices of disposals of Swiss banks be affected?
Well, I don't think that the price of Swiss banks is going to be affected by what is going on with the US, but I think more generally what we are looking at is a complete change of paradigm, which sees the Swiss private banks moving from a non-tax compliant or partly non-tax compliant model to a tax compliant model. And this is, as you may know, is also something which the Swiss government is very vocal about, and so is the Swiss bank regulator, FINMA. This plus the additional regulatory burden which Swiss banks as well as any other banks have seen occur since 2008 certainly has had an impact on the pricing of these banks' sales. And if you look at the multiples which are applied today for a sale of a private bank, it's certainly a fraction of what it used to be 5-6 years ago. Non-tax compliant business is seen as a liability rather than as an asset.
So what you're saying, Shelby, is that the Swiss banks should at last be concentrating on those traditional skills, the portfolio management, asset allocation, rather than attracting any questionable, secrecy-led, tax-friendly business?
Well, I think to be fair to the Swiss banks, most of them have come to realize that some time ago. And I think the times where Swiss banking secrecy was the key attraction of Swiss banks, is far gone. And I think for a number of years now, a number of banks have decisively opted for a tax-compliant model and have indeed tried to stress the other qualities which the Swiss banking system has. Quality of services, in particular in portfolio management, the political stability of the country, the strength of the Swiss franc, are all elements which are there to remain.
So at the end of the day, Shelby, these quite intrusive probes into the Swiss banking industry, are they actually a good thing? Do you think they'll have positive results for the industry?
Well, I certainly think that this US investigation, which is coupled by an assertiveness which you also see throughout Europe, is pushing banks to change their business model. And I think those who have understood the situation properly, I think in that as an opportunity as opposed to react simply to a change of regulatory circumstances.
And in your job, Shelby, you work very closely with many of the Swiss banks in Geneva and Zurich. Are you optimistic for the fortunes of the Swiss banking industry in general?
I am. I think the number of players may gradually reduce. I mean, there's an element of size which is much more in play now than it used to be, and I think the better will survive and should prosper. That's certainly my conclusion, yes.
Shelby Dupasquier, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Yuri.